right, welcome back. We're working on authserver.net. This is the project we were working on yesterday to create the new authorization servers. Not a problem at all, man. Thank you for checking out the videos. I'm glad you're enjoying them. So let me show here, if we look at the startup, here I've got a Jwt Service, which we're adding as a transient. And then that's basically it. We created a controller in here called an accounts controller that has two endpoints, one for authorize and one for token. Token at the moment actually generates this whole token here. And I'm doing it only for one account because I don't have the authorization protocol in here at the moment. When we generate this token, it spits back out a models response token response, which has our variables which are defined in the protocol. And then here we have a separate project which is called Web API. And in this we have a startup which is using a bearer token for authentication. We're telling it that we want to validate the issuer, audience, and lifetime. Although one thing that Identity Server did that I'm not necessarily sure I need to do until I get to OIDC Connect, OpenID Connect, is that I'm not really going to be tracking the resource servers. So this API is just a way that you can see how to grab the JWT token, and you can see that we have valid audiences of either the API or the client. That's because this is set up for when we have another flow type to handle the API. So when this is all done, we have a protected resource here called authorize, or by adding the authorize attribute. And then here, our get method. So we should, when we run this, we're going to run both projects here. We have a client, but I haven't wired it up yet. So we're going to switch over to Postman. Second. Okay. So everything is started up. So on the back end, 44372 is our web API. And when we hit this, 44372, oh, it never started the project. Okay, now we run it. 401 authorized. Okay, so now we're going to hit our auth server, and this is what we were working on yesterday. So we're going to issue a token. We're going to remove the authorization header this time, and instead what I'm going to send is a client ID here. And I want to call this test client. And then we also want to have a client secret, which doesn't, we need it in order to properly decode that. So that is here in my globals. And we run it. You can see that we're issuing the token here. We grab our client ID and the secret. We generate our token. Looks like I need to update the database. So over here in the main project, we'll set it as as the startup project, and I'm going to do a add migration, another set of changes, and these are just temporary. And we're going to do a update database. When I look at the data here, we need to add these things. And we need another migration for that. Change seed data. Okay. And now from that, we want to do a remove migration if we can. We'll do this one again, but fix the path. Perfect. Okay, so now we can run the whole thing. I do need to change one more thing so that I don't have a problem here. I need to put this in with a timestamp of a year is 2020, the month is 12, the day is 22, the hour is 10, the minute is 36, the seconds is 0. And we're going to say one more seed data change. And then I'm going to update the database. Okay, so now I can close everything up. Try this again. Okay, 401 unauthorized. And we can see that here. Issue the request. Here's our token. We can see it expires in 900 seconds. It's a little fast. I think it's usually 3600. Also, we've generated a refresh token, but I'm not using those at the moment. So now when I add my authorization header here, it's saying unauthorized because I need to check the little box. Now you can see status code is a 200 and we receive our data. So things are working. One thing we need to add in is a CORS policy. So let's do that. Just an second. I have an example here that I'd like to use. Oh, it's not there. So we're not using the built-in CORS policy for this because each one of these different clients is going to have different allowed CORS origins. So we need to make a new model in here, call it a client CORS origin. Like that. And this needs to have in it a client ID and a client. And over here, we want to have this with a list of client CORS origin. Can you design the project in microservice direction? That's exactly how it's set up. So currently we have three microservices for this, one for a client, one for a web API, and then one for the auth server. If you look at another project that I have called the monitor, which is live, you can see the number of microservices that are running for this. There's a TCP server, an SSL server, a landing page, a web API, a WebSocket server, and then there's also a Angular app, and all of those are being fueled by this one server, which is an identity server, which is what we are going for. I don't use Mediator, I use Docker Compose. Okay, we can try Mediator if you want. I haven't tried it. Let me write that down. Okay. So now we have our allowed CORS origins per client, okay? So over here, where I'm accepting this in my accounts, I want to start to separate this logic a little bit. So I want to have a protected virtual, and we're going to say it's a key value pair of a string and a string. And I'm going to say this is called Decode Credentials. Pardon me. I'm going to make a new class in here. Call it helpers. I'm going to move this into it. And actually, we're just going to put this in the root of the project. We're going to make it a static class called Decode Credentials. Like that. And all this is going to do is this logic. Where we're going to grab this and we want to do it like this way here. Can I return a null on this? Could I do it like as a nullable tuple? There we go. And then here, we'll do it like that. This one, we need to put this back over here. And we're going to return here a new tuple which is going to be this one and then this one here. And we want this to be a string and a string. I see people encouraging mediator but not seeing its real effects. We could take a look at it. I haven't played with it. I've only used Docker Compose, but I've seen a lot of them. Docker Compose is the main orchestrator that I play with. I guess also I use the AWS ECS stuff for a while. Okay. So here we've got our decoded credentials. And now I can do a if our authorization token is not this, then I want to do a var client ID equals string.empty and then a client secret equals string.empty. And then this one we want to do a var credentials equals helpers dot decode credentials of your authorization, which we want to call a bearer token. And then we want to say client ID equals credentials first, item 1, and then the client secret equals credentials dot item 2. So now when this comes in, we get a client ID. And now what I need to do is verify allowed CORS origin. We're going to make a service for this. And I'm just going to call this the data access layer. And in this, we want to have a new function and a constructor that passes in the application database context. So now it's a transient. Like that. And then what we want to do is we want to start adding in things for our data access layer. So I want to have like a get client asynchronous, which is going to pass in a GUID client ID. We'll just call it ID. And then a GUID for the application user ID. We don't care about that. Okay, and this is going to return a client, right? And we're going to do a return context.first. We want to do clients.first or default. The ID is equal to ID and it is active. And I'm purposely leaving this polymorphic. So now up here I can have a data access layer called data access layer. And then we can add in a new data access layer, data access layer. So here we want to get the client, which is the one by the public virtual client get client asynchronous, and this is by the string, which is the client ID. And we want to do this to lowercase. And I also want to trim it. Now, in the context, I wanted to add in here a new, I think it's on Entity Builder. Let me see. Oh, this app doesn't have it. Just a second. So here, I want to add in some new indexes. First, we want to have a base.onModelCreating. And then I want to have a model builder dot entity, and this is for my client. I want to say has index, and it's on client ID, and I want to say is unique is true. We also want to say model builder dot entity of my refresh token has index token is unique is true. Okay, that should be good. So in here, we're going to get our client, and this one's going to be from our client ID and the secret. And I want to do a var base 64 encoded secret equals encoding dot UTF-8 dot get bytes. And we want to do that to the, where are we converting that in the service already here? Oh, it's in the accounts controller. Convert from base 64. Convert dot from base 64 string, and then it's a encoding dot UTF-8 dot get string from these bytes, and that's for the secret. And then we want to do this where the client ID is that, and the x.client secret is equal to client secret, and it is active. So in my startup, I want to register this as a services.addTransient called a data access layer. So now in generate token, we can get rid of this. We can just add this as a client. And now we can get rid of the application database context here because I want to keep them separated. I can't because the refresh tokens are in here as well. So we need that context. Now I have two instances of these contexts in this one transaction. So I don't want to do that. I want to have these as one service. And so which one do I want to have as the base? This one. So we're going to add in the Jwt service here. I'm going to do it the other way. So I'm going to do data access layer here. Like that. Which means down here where you're using this context, this is where you can change this. So we're going to say that this is a client we're doing this by client ID, so I can do a await data access layer dot get client asynchronous of my client ID, a string for the client secret, and then the token. I just wrote async, but I didn't actually do it. Interesting. Okay, like that. Okay. This one, we want to have a public virtual asynchronous task of a refresh token called get refresh token asynchronous. And we want to pass in the refresh token only, right? And this isn't a refresh token, this is a bearer token, right? Oh, no, this is a is refresh token valid asynchronous. We'll just do it like that with an exception. And then like that. And we're just going to say get refresh token asynchronous. So we can get rid of this. Now we can do this as the data access layer dot get refresh token asynchronous. Now I want to have a public virtual asynchronous task of a refresh token called update refresh token asynchronous. And when we do this, we're going to pass in a new refresh token. And all it is a context.refreshTokens.update my refresh token. And then we're just going to make this a bool. And it's going to be a return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. Okay. That's for the revoke token. Up here for the generate tokens, your generate refresh token down here. This should be asynchronous in a task. And then we want to do a public virtual asynchronous task of a refresh token called add refresh token asynchronous. Now I'm going to do a context.refreshTokens.add my refresh token. And then we'll have a return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. And so if this is the case, then I want to return my refresh token. Otherwise, I want to return null. Maybe I can do all that in one line. Yeah. Await data access layer dot add refresh token, and we want to do this one. Like that. And then like that. And then like that. Okay. That looks good. So in here, we're going to move this and this down here. And now I need another type of token, which is called an auth code. Authorization code. And I want to put this in the table called authorization codes. And an authorization code is going to be connected to a, well, we'll deal with that in a second. Here I want to say it has a string called code or token, or we'll call it code. All right, see you later, Nigene Quo Vit. I'll put these videos up on the web for you today, this afternoon. Okay. And now I want to have another function called public virtual asynchronous task of a string called generate authorization code. And that's going to be for a client ID and a client secret. So this one we'll wrap it in a try catch. And I want to do a client equals await my data access layer dot get client asynchronous by my client ID and my client secret. And I think we need to start looking at the grant. So let's take a look over here. The authorization code grant is used to obtain tokens and refresh tokens. It's optimized for confidential case clients. So that's a web application that's being done on a server side. And it needs to have redirection. So the client initiates the flow by directing the resource owner or the user to the authorization endpoint, which we currently have set up. The client includes its client identifier, requested scope, local state, and a redirection URL. So over here, I want to have a if we await this, and I want to have a new public virtual asynchronous task of a bool called is origin URI valid asynchronous. And I want to pass in here a client and then a origin URL. And I want to do this for the client, and then the origin is a I want to say if my client is equal to null, then I want to return a bad request with the line that says invalid client. Then I want to say return bad request, invalid CORS configuration. So one thing that I'm supposed to have in the request is a response type. And that's up here. So I changed this yesterday, but I need it back to how it was before. So that was a response type equals request.query called response type dot toString var redirect URI equals request.query called redirect URI. And then the last one is state. Okay. So the first thing is that we need to request the client identifier, requested scope, local state. So I want to say switch here on my response type. And if it is one that says code, then I want to do a return await, and it's going to be called authorization code. And so down here, I'm going to add a new protected virtual asynchronous task of action result called authorization code. And if it's a break, we want to say return bad request, invalid grant type. but it's not. We're going to call it response type. Okay. So now that we're down here, I want to pass in my string for my redirect URI. And my string for my state. We also need to get the client ID. And then another one here for scope. And state. So we want string, client ID, redirect ID, scope, and state. Do you also need to pass in a client secret? I don't think so. Invalid scope. Okay, so here we have these things that we're supposed to send back. Invalid request. So when you're doing this, I'm just going to type in here, does authorization code flow require a client secret? I don't think so. See, I don't think you have to use the secret. See, I don't see anything about a client secret. Client secret. So it's only used on that one. So now I want to use my data access layer here and do a get client on my client ID only. And if my client is equal to null, then I want to do this here. As a return new bad, we're just going to say bad request, and I'm going to pass in this. And this is unauthorized client. So over here, we're going to pass client instead of client ID. Like that. And now I want to say if my client is a client auth code, equals null. See. Then we're going to so if my client.getType does not equal a type of client auth code, then you want to say unauthorized client. Okay. I need to do a CORS check somewhere. Here, right? And then we also need to do something where we do verify scopes. And we actually want to do this all in the header. So just like this. Okay, so back up here, the client initiates the flow by sending over the client identifier requested scope, local state, and a redirection URI. The authentication server authenticates the resource owner and establishes whether the resource owner grants or denies the client's access request. So what that means is that now we're going to redirect to a page. And we want to redirect to login. So now I'm going to create a new public virtual void called login. And we just want to return the view. And it's going to be a action result, and we want this to be a HTTP GET. And we want to pass in the string for the redirect URI. Like that. And then down here, we need to add a new view to home, which I'm going to call login. Come on. Okay, we need to add a new method in here called getClient. And then down here, I need to have a public virtual asynchronous task of a client called create client asynchronous, which is going to pass in a client. And all it's going to be is a context.clients.addClient, and then a if my await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0, then we want to return my client. Otherwise, I want to return null. And I want to do this for my client.client secret. And then we're going to set it again right here. So down here, we're going to have the verified CORS policy. And I want to say if my await data access layer is origin valid, which is this one, and then we want to do it for the and now I want to look up ASP.NET 3.1 core, and I want to get request URL. We're going to add this extensions to AuthNet. So I want to say it's a request .get encoded URL. Like that. Then I want to return one of these, which is a access denied. Okay. So over here, when I'm doing my valid origin, I want to get my entities is my await context dot client CORS origins. And we want to get all of them where my client ID is equal to client.id and they are active. And I want to get them where the client ID equals that and the origin URL .trim .to lower is equal to my origin URL .trim .to lower. And it's active. Over here in the context, we're going to add a compound key onto a client CORS origin. And I want to put it on the client ID and the I don't want that. I don't want that at all. Okay. So this is going to be a return, and it's any asynchronous. Okay. So far, so good. Let's give it a try. This now wants a full client. I don't think that's right. We want this to be a client ID. Like that. Okay, now we'll give it a run. Looks good. It's not running both. That's okay. That's okay. We only need the one. So now when I run this, and we want to change this to be response type equals code and our redirect URL and the state and the, what else did we want on here? The only thing we don't have is scope. So let's send that. Didn't like one of my queries. Let's run it again. It doesn't get the client ID because I'm not passing one in. So here I want to say if string is null or white space of my client ID, then we want to do this. And we were supposed to call it invalid unauthorized client. Let's try it again. This isn't going to work because now in my data, I need to change this just a little bit. Which is here where I'm setting the client secret. We want to encode it. Like that. And then I need to also include and we're going to change this to be a client auth code. And I also want to add a entity called a client CORS origin. And we want to add a new one where my client ID is this. The We also want to have on here the origin URI. The ID needs to be 1. And then our origin URI is, and I need to do a C# HTTP encode. URL encode. It just seems that easy. So it looks like we have one called a system.web.http-utility.url encode. And we want that to come from the audience URL, right? And we need to add a new ID for that, which we can do right here. Looks good. Now we can do a add migration. We're going to say added CORS origins. So it's not happy with me because it says this needs to be a 2 base 64 string, and this needs to be a encoding.utf8.get bytes. Now I need to remove that migration because I need to have another timestamp on it. And then also, that's it. Done. Cool. So now we can run it. And down here, I can run my project. And we got unauthorized client. Why didn't it return that? Weird. We just do it like as a bad request. Perfect. There's our bad request, and there's our location here. Let's try that again. And just to make sure, that is supposed to go like this, which looks right. Okay. Perfect. So now when I look here at my parameters, we can also add in here a client ID, and it's called a test client. Okay, we receive the client. We do have a valid origin. And it brought me to 404 not found. Because this needs to be a route of login. So it's looking under accounts, which is not where it's at. It's under home. So let's move it. There it is. So we did get our page, which is perfect. And if I look at the response, where's the URL? If I look at that again here, my redirect is only that. So back up here on the flow, So we also want to include the state on that. And then I want to say and I want to say is not empty or null state. Then I want to return the and state equals state. Otherwise, I just want to return string.empty. Which means that on my login page, I need to, and now what we can do is we can hijack from this app the view. Okay, this one wants a login view model, so let's make it. And it's only going to have on it a string for the username and then a string for the password. And I want you to do like a data type dot username. So just here password. And this one we can say max length of 50. And we can say required for both. So on this, we want to say prop bool enable local login. You also want to have the return URL. Right here. And then you also want to have remember login and allow remember login. And then we can comment these ones out for now. Now you also want to have on here a visible external provider. So I'm going to make another class called a external provider. And all I want to have here is a string for the return URL. So up here we want to add in these visible external providers as a collection, or we'll just do it as an array, like that. Now this is coming from the model. And on this one, we just want to have a authentication scheme. And then we also want to have a string here for the display name. And we will move this type to its own class. We can get rid of these scripts that we're loading. And I think it's going to look pretty good like this. Okay, we run it. We get our response type. It didn't attach the state. It never found validation summary. Didn't find that, didn't find that. I'm going to check that again. Get my state here. Oh, because it's only getting the redirect URL. It's not getting state. It's separating it is what it's doing. So it's getting the redirect URL and then it's separating out the parameters because I called it a redirect URL. So we can have a string here for the state. And now I want to have a new login view model. And we want to look up these things. The username is nothing. The return URL equals redirect URI. The username, we don't know that. The allow remember login, we can look that up. Enable local login, we can look that up. Visible external providers, we can provide those. Remember login. We also need to have on here the state. Which means that we also want to have a hidden state here. Now these things, I have to look up how we got those. If I look at the monitor for the login controller, it's building the authorization request here. This is building the providers. And this is put into account options. Huh. Okay. So for now, we're just going to say true, true, new array of external providers of size 0. Yes, you can remember that, and the state. Now, if I look at here, we have our state and our return URL. And I can copy all of this into a document. Dump all of that in. And here's our login. So now I'm going to get a username and a password when this gets submit. Form ASP route login. So over here, under home, we need to have a new one, which is the post. And I want to get a login view model. And now what I want to do is validate login credentials and continue the flow. So we'll do a return redirect to my login view model dot return URL. Now that's not correct, because we're not done with the flow yet. So we need to have something on here called like a user service. And we want to say authenticate user, and we want to pass in a string for the username and a string for the password. And then we'll add in the user service up here. And then right here. And now I want to say if my user service dot authenticate user of my login view model dot username, and then my login view model dot password. Then I want to return a back over here in accounts. We can do this access denied one. Like that. So now the authorization server redirects the user agent back to the client using the redirection URL provided. It includes an authorization code and the state. So we want to do this. And then we want to do a slash and then I want to say code equals, and then we want to do an and, then I want to say if my string dot is empty or white space of my login view model dot state, then I want to do a and state equals login view model.state. Otherwise, you just want to do a string.empty. We need to add that. So you should have in your Jwt service, a generate authorization code. But we need it for that client ID. I don't know what that client ID is yet. Oh, all we want to do is just this. Because it seems like you almost want to generate that authorization code back over here when you know that it's the right client type. Well, let's just see what happens here. Okay. Let's see. So I need to set up a client for this. So if I was to look at Ali Chat, I think it's actually the monitor. Let's take a look at this one first. Get access token auth code. This is what we want. So over here, I'm going to create a new class, call it System Browser. And we'll put this back in auth authserver.net.client. And we'll install these packages at once. So we need to say use Kestrel missing NuGet. Okay, let's add this package here. Good, okay. So that's the system browser. Hold on. Let's see what we're doing with that browser. It's used in OIDC client options, but we don't have OIDC client done yet. Okay, so we're going to do it a different way. We're going to remove this. And instead, I'm going to add a new project to this. And I'm going to make this one a ASP.NET Core Web application. And I'm going to call this Authserver.NET Client. And we want to make it a web page with MVC. That's fine like that. And so when we visit the home page on index, I want to do a redirect to this one. So it's globals dot and it's your auth server URI. With your globals.auth server port. And I want to do authorize. And I want to pass in my client ID, which is test client. My state is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. My redirect URI is that, and my response type is code. Let's see what happens. Okay, it says it couldn't do user service, which means that in startup, I need to add a transient for user service. Okay, now we're going to start the client. We need to stop this. I do not want this running as a Docker image. So we need it like that. Hey there, Cyber Cobalt Ethan. How are you doing today? Welcome to the channel. That looks good. Now we can go back and start this one. Try it again. Okay, it's going to do my redirection here. Wait, where did it send me? Try that again. Good, that worked. Put in some fake info. Click the login. Perfect. We get the authentication. We generate the code. Oh crap, that's why. This needs to be asynchronous. Doing pretty bad. I might have the deadly sniffles. Oh man, not the COVID, right? I'm sorry, man. My aunt who misses her spleen has been confirmed to have it so bad. I'm sorry, man. That sucks. Hopefully everything turns out okay. Okay, we start the other one. There it is, hits the authorized endpoint. Redirects us here. Connects me over. And redirects me back. No. Four 44303. So I think the redirect URL I'm using is bad. This one is running on four 4338. How am I doing? I'm doing okay. Nothing really to complain about. Stressed, but not too stressed. Happy that I'm finally building this thing and that it's going pretty smoothly. Okay, let's run the front end. Should redirect me. It did. Back over here at my home. I'm going to say this. Kicks me back. To 44338. Didn't take it because this is a HTTPS. And I want to say that this is my sign in. And so I'll make a public eye action result here called login, which is going to pass a code and a state. And we want to give it a model here of a login view login call. We're going to call this authorize login view model. I don't care. It doesn't matter. And all this is going to have on it is a string for the code and a string for the state. And then on this, all I want to do is a ASP4. Oh God, I don't remember how to do this at all. It's been a long time. One of these has got to have a parameter on it. Label ASP4, that's it, okay? So we could just do a label ASP4 equals, and we want this one to be the state. And then we also want to have one for the code. Give it a run. Stress not good for you. Watch out with that stuff. It's not HTTP status code 418 to 451. Yeah, luckily everything is something I've implemented on this thing. Okay, here's a redirect. Looks like it's, all right, whatever. And it redirects me back here. And now I've got my code and my state. And so now back over here, I wanted to pass in my new login view model here, which had my code equals code and my state equals state. So we can see that I have those. And now the next thing is I need to distribute that for the token endpoint. So it's only showing the label, so I actually wanted to do the input, or we could do it as a display, I guess. So we want to do a and then we'll do it here again. So let's restart this and try it one more time. And there we go. There's our code and our state. So the next thing that we need to do now is redirect here. We need to make an access token request. So that's down here. So in the client now, when we go here, I want to do a new request using this stuff, and we need to include, so we're going to say that this is called a token request, and we need to include a string called grant type, a code, which is a string, a string for the redirect URI, and a string for the client ID. That's it. So now we just need to have these 4 parameters. And so all I'm going to do here is we're going to do, and this is not the way you're supposed to do this, so let's do it right. We're going to register a new add singleton of an HTTP client. And now in the home controller, I can import my HTTP client. And now, what we're going to do is I want to make a new request. And we want to post it. And it's going to go to the globals.auth server URI. And then we want to set it to the port. And then it's called a token. And then we need to have our content. And this is called the result. And so now if my result.succeeded, so let's fix this. We need to do a HTTP client C# this post. Let's use this one. So we're going to have these key value pairs. And we want to add in the different components here in the call, which are And we want to have these things as a grant type. And the second one is authorization code. We want to have the one that says code to be here. We want to have one which is the redirect URI. Which is the same one that we sent before. So globals dot client server URI. So it's this one. And then client ID, which is test client, and client secret, which is this one here. Just like that. And then I want to do a var result equals await client dot send asynchronous of my request. And then I want to say result dot content dot read as string asynchronous. And that's all I want to return. That's it. We're going to try it again. Okay. We're going to redirect back over here to the token endpoint. We get our credentials. The input is not a valid base 64 string. Okay, so what was that about? Try it again. oh, we need to go the other direction. This needs to be a 2base64 string. And this wants to be a get bytes. And then the create is the other direction. 2base64 string of my get bytes. Okay, we'll launch the client. There's the redirect. Takes me to the authorized URL. And now it returns an OK. But the token request has a redirect URI. So it's a redirect to the token request dot redirect URI. We need to verify same URI in redirect and client configuration. And then we want to add in the and if I look at this documentation, the response here is a 200 in the body. Because this is now a second call. So in this one, you want to return OK for the 200 result. And you just want to return this generate token. which back over here on your client, you're just issuing the send and getting it back. So let's see what happens one more time. We have my request. We send it. Here's the response. The content is it didn't change the parameters. It needs to redirect one more time after it. Finishes all this. It needs to direct all the way back, right, to the original URI. So here, we're going to look at this. And even see what's coming back here. We're almost done here with this one. Okay, and here our response is, here it is, access token. So we have it here. So now I'm going to change this. So I just want this to show token. And I want to deserialize this as a token. And then here, I want to do a that's for a string. Read a string asynchronous, and we want to do a JSON. Convert dot, is it convert or utility? I can't ever remember. JSON convert deserialize object as a type of token response. And then we want to set this to be the response.access token. And there it is. There's our token. And if I came over here to a JWT decode and we take a look at it, you can see our claims. Well, we haven't loaded claims yet, but everything else is there. So that's most of the flow for authorization code. We need to fix the redirect URLs because they need to match. Right. And that means that in my context, we don't have redirect URIs in here yet. So we're going to add a new class. We're going to call it a client redirect URI. And all we want to say is the string for the redirect URI. And this is called clients redirect URIs. And we want this to be a GUID for the client ID and then a client for the client. Which needs to have a list of these client redirect URIs. Okay. So we still have a fair amount of validations to add in, but that's our basic start for authorization code flow. So I'm going to commit this out to the public Git and take a break. We'll be back in just like 2 hours. Thanks for staying with me so far. So we'll be back at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you have any questions, it's a great time to put them into the chat. Also, check us out at our Discord, discord.pixelwarstudios.com. Thanks again. Talk to you in a little bit later. Bye, guys.